Funding for this CyberWire podcast is made possible in part by Duo. While remote work has been on the rise for years now, the recent rapid expansion of work-from-home culture presents new security challenges. It's Duo's mission to make application access more secure for organizations of all sizes. Duo's modern access security is designed to safeguard all users, devices, and applications so you can stay focused on what you do best. Give your organization the peace of mind that only complete device visibility can bring. Visit duo.sc/cyberwire to sign up for a free 30-day trial. And we thank Duo for sponsoring our show. The FBI warns organizations that Mamba Ransomware is out and about in a newly evolved form. Facebook takes down a Chinese cyber espionage operation targeting Uyghurs. Huawei joins the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Slac thinks it might have made a security and privacy misstep. Caleb Barlow from Synergistek on healthcare interoperability. Our guest is Roy Amit from Deep Instinct on their 2020 Cyber Threat Landscape Report. And a look at fleeceware. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Thursday, March 25th, 2021. On Tuesday, the US FBI circulated a flash alert about Mamba Ransomware to industry. Mamba now uses a weaponized version of Diskcryptor against its targets. Diskcryptor is an open-source full-disk encryption tool. As the FBI points out, the software isn't inherently malicious, but Mamba's operators have weaponized it. After Mamba has done its work and rendered the victim's files inaccessible, it displays a ransom note that includes the actor's email address, ransomware file name, the host system name, and a place to enter the decryption key. Victims are instructed to email the extortionist and arrange payment of the ransom. A decryption key is promised in exchange for payment. The Bureau recommends adopting 15 specific and familiar hygienic practices to avoid a Mamba infestation. One of the recommendations is peculiar to defense against this latest version of Mamba. Quote, if Diskcryptor is not used by an organization, add the key artifact files used by Diskcryptor to the organization's execution blacklist. Any attempts to install or run this encryption program and its associated files should be prevented. End quote. And of course, the Bureau discourages anyone from paying the ransom. Quote, payment does not guarantee files will be recovered. It may also embolden adversaries to target additional organizations, encourage other criminal actors to engage in the distribution of ransomware, and or fund illicit activities. End quote. So, you may not get your files back even if you pay, but one thing is for sure, you'll help fuel the bandit economy of the cyber underworld. Facebook announced yesterday that it had taken down a Chinese cyber espionage operation directed principally against Uyghur activists, journalists, and dissidents living abroad in Turkey, Kazakhstan, US, Syria, Australia, Canada, and other countries. Facebook's tweet announcing the takedown cited earlier work on the threat actor by Velocity, Project Zero, and Trend Micro, who called the group Evil Eye. Facebook said that a lot of the surveillance activity was conducted off-platform, with surveillance installed via maliciously crafted bogus news articles that falsely represented themselves as media reports in outlets covering news of interest to the Uyghur diaspora. Those links are now blocked on Facebook. The Washington Post notes that the takedown shows that Facebook's intelligence operations are now looking beyond Facebook itself. Huawei has joined the Organization of Islamic Cooperation's Computer Emergency Response Team, OIC-CERT, the first tech company to do so. Malaysia and the UAE sponsored Huawei's membership, Gulf News reports. OIC-CERT is the third largest organization of its kind. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation has 57 member countries. Huawei sees its invitation to OIC-CERT as a testimony to its cybersecurity chops. Gulf News sees that invitation as, quote, a rebuff to recent U.S. efforts to stop countries from signing up Huawei for their 5G networks, end quote. The four most dismaying words in IT may be, why don't we just, as in, why don't we just open up our platform so users can DM anyone? Slack, the widely used business chat application, yesterday introduced a feature, Slack Connect, that would have allowed messages to be exchanged with people outside the user's organization. Early notices haven't been positive. It was poorly received, with users seeing the feature as a privacy and security bug. According to Vice's motherboard, Slack, acknowledging the decision was a mistake, is now backtracking and limiting the new feature's scope. Quote, after rolling out Slack Connect DMs this morning, we received valuable feedback from our users about how email invitations to use the feature could potentially be used to send abusive or harassing messages. We are taking immediate steps to prevent this kind of abuse, beginning today with the removal of the ability to customize a message when a user invites someone to Slack Connect DMs. We made a mistake in this initial rollout that is inconsistent with our goals for the product and the typical experience of Slack Connect usage. End quote. Many organizations aren't waiting for the walkback and are limiting the feature themselves, the record reports. You may ask, don't people in organizations get lots of email that they don't want? Sure, but as the help desk types would say, that's a known issue, and organizations have a lot more control over their email environments than they do over Slack Connect, whose granularity apparently doesn't get much more finer than on or off. And finally, greetings, fellow youths, and remember fleeceware? Well, don't worry, fleeceware remembers you. It has to remember you, at least well enough to know when that free trial ages into a premium subscription. Security firm Avast yesterday blogged about what they found when they went looking for fleeceware on planets Apple and Android. 250 apps with a north of 1 billion downloads and an estimated dodgy revenue in excess of $400 million, which is a lot of fleece. Fleeceware, remember, is an app that starts off with a free trial and then at the end of the trial period, quietly enrolls the inattentive user into a subscription with whopping big fees that users wouldn't have signed up for if they'd been in their right, which is to say skeptically vigilant mind. As Avast puts it, quote, the application takes advantage of users who are not familiar with how subscriptions work on mobile devices, meaning that users can be charged even after they've deleted the offending application, end quote. The free trial period is usually just 3 days long. The apps usually have some not particularly distinctive functionality, which they actually deliver, more or less forgettably, but their principal purpose is to fleece the unwary. The most common nominal benefits on offer include musical instrument apps, palm readers, image editors, camera filters, fortune tellers, QR code and PDF readers, and slime simulators. Who falls for this stuff? Kids, mostly, as the popularity of slime simulators might suggest. The youths see free trial, figure they're good to go, and so they are, for 3 days. After that, it's Katie bar the door until mom or pop notice these weird subscription charges on their statements. By that time, the grifters have, as the kids like to say, already made some bank. It's time to take a moment to tell you about our sponsor, Tanium. In today's connected world, we rely on endpoints for everything, from telework to mobile banking, telemedicine, and online learning. The large-scale shift to remote work in the COVID-19 era makes managing and securing these endpoints more challenging than ever. Tanium, the provider of endpoint management and security built for the world's most demanding IT environments, gets organizations ready for a perimeter-less enterprise. The company recently published a report with PSB Insights on the new security threats facing organizations as a result of the pandemic. It's titled IT Leads the Way, How the Pandemic Empowered IT. It features intelligence from 500 senior-level IT decision-makers. Visit Tanium.com/empowerit to download the full report. And we thank Tanium for sponsoring our show. The researchers at security firm Deep Instinct recently published their 2020 Cyber Threat Landscape Report, and among the findings was the discovery of adversarial machine learning being used in the wild. Roei Amit is a threat intelligence researcher at Deep Instinct.
So every year around December, we realized that we have a lot of data that we collected over the year, and we think that we have some insights that we think could contribute to the community and to our purposes. So we gather up all of our data we collected in our cloud and other resources, and we create this research paper, which is not too long but not too short. And we just, it's right about exactly the amount you want to read without getting too caught up in all the technical details, but still, feel like you had a good and interesting read and not just, get the highlights.
Well, and I mean, would you say it's fair to say 2020 was a year like no other, given the pandemic?
I totally agree. We've seen a lot of interesting things happened, especially because of COVID-19. For example, almost all of the phishing campaigns in some way or another included the COVID-19. These were the most, this was like the most talked hot topic in the phishing campaigns themselves, the documents or the fake links that were used. It was also, it's interesting to know that the second most common subjects were the U.S. elections and the Black Lives Matter movement.
That is interesting.
Yes, I agree. It's very interesting to see what attackers think that will be interesting for their targets.
Right. One of the things that you draw attention to here is advanced adversarial machine learning in people's defense posture. Can you take us through your thoughts there?
Yeah, sure. So we saw in the past theoretical work and proof of concepts in which adversarial machine learning attacks are aimed at security products that utilize machine learning and deep learning in order to evade their detection. What they basically do is trying to take advantage of design weaknesses and flaws that are inherently in the way that machine learning-based or deep learning-based cybersecurity models work in order to evade their detection. And we saw it in the past in proof of concepts and in theory, but actually in 2020, we found a sample in the wild that utilizes adversarial machine learning techniques in order to bypass these products. And I'm not saying we can expect every malware to be able to do so, but it is something new and something that should be looked at by anyone in the industry. It's very interesting to see what happens. And of course, there are ways to defend, and these products can defend from these techniques. But it is very interesting to see that hackers and attackers also evolve, and malware developers are continuing to try to find ways to bypass these products.
That's Roei Amit from Deep Instinct. And now, a word from our sponsor, KnowBe4. There's a reason more than half of today's ransomware victims end up paying the ransom. Cyber criminals have become thoughtful, taking time to maximize your organization's potential damage and their payoffs. After achieving root access, the bad guys explore your network, reading email, finding data troves, and once they know you, they craft a plan to cause the most panic, pain, and operational disruption. Ransomware has gone nuclear. The folks at KnowBe4 have an upcoming webinar that'll get you up to speed on ransomware. In this webinar, you'll find out why data backups, even offline backups, won't save you, why ransomware isn't your real problem, and how your end users can become your best last line of defense. Go to knowbe4.com/ransom to learn more about the webinar. That's knowbe4.com/ransom. And we thank KnowBe4 for sponsoring our show. And joining me once again is Caleb Barlow. He is the CEO at Synergistech. Caleb, it's always great to have you back. Today we are talking about healthcare interoperability and the effect that may have for security professionals. What sort of things do you want to share with us today?
Well, hello, Dave.
Hello.
What if I told you and kind of everyone listening that you needed to open up your corporate databases so that any of your clients, or let's say even independent research groups, could access your most sensitive records? And oh, by the way, this was going to be required by regulation. I think most people listening to this podcast would probably have an issue with that.
Yeah, I think you'd get a fair amount of pushback on that. I think it's fair to say.
But that's what's happening in healthcare. So there's something called the 21st Century Cures Act. It was signed into law in December of 2016. And this was the start of what we call the information blocking and interoperability rules. So, Dave, imagine if you're a healthcare provider, the rule prohibits information blocking, which is defined as something except as required by law or covered by an exception, is likely to interfere with the access, exchange, or use of electronic health information. And the rule goes on to define kind of 8 exceptions that would not, construe information blocking. So what does this mean? Well, this means that if a patient has an app, let's say a fitness app, or, something else that, maybe they're working on weight loss, or, it could be any number of applications that want to access your healthcare record, you need to allow it unless one of these 8 exceptions is met. But what it also means is that an independent researcher, let's say someone doing cancer research, and they want to access patient information on cancer patients, you also need to allow that as well.
Okay, what about patient privacy?
Well, remember, when we look at patient privacy, the way this comes into play under HIPAA is by requiring that entities that access a healthcare record have certain security provisions and controls in place. It doesn't restrict them from actually accessing it in the first place. It just says they have to take due care when accessing it. So in a lot of ways, this opens it up. And remember, HIPAA is all about portability. Now, the P in HIPAA is portability as it refers to insurance. But, if you really kind of dig through all these murky regulations, it's also about opening up healthcare information for research, for other applications, and other things you may want to do. So on one hand, as a consumer, this is great because I can go in, I can see what's in my healthcare record, I can link it to my, fitness application or whatever else is I want to track. But from a security professional standpoint, this is a nightmare because I have no idea what the security is of these apps. I may not even know who's behind these apps in terms of ownership or these research projects, but I have to allow them in. And we're actually moving into a mode here where the actual enforcement of this rule is going to start to come into play over the next couple of months.
Is there no vetting? I mean, can anybody just hang up a shingle and call themselves a researcher and have at your medical records?
Well, it's not quite that simple. And as you can imagine, like all regulations, this is very murky. And no one yet really totally understands exactly how this is going to be enforced. But, suffice it to say, you could, as a healthcare provider, restrict someone from accessing this information if one of these 8 conditions were met. And one of them, of course, is security. So, you've got to look at the type of risk, the type of harm. So risk of harm is one of the issues. Privacy is one of the issues. Security is one of the issues. Or if it's simply infeasible, not just I don't want to do it, but truly infeasible to access this data. Otherwise, you've pretty much got to allow this, and you're going to have to demonstrate why you think that individual or entity asking for access can't secure it or has an associated privacy risk with it.
Are people out there already trying to take advantage of this? Are they knocking on healthcare providers' doors and saying, let us have at it?
Well, I think we have to divide this, Dave, into kind of 2 swim lanes. The first swim lane, which is, can a consumer take advantage of this? The answer to that is absolutely yes. I mean, I know my healthcare provider, there's an online portal. I go in and, there's a laundry list of applications that they've already worked through the API that I can connect to my mobile phone or to, other entities that may not even be mobile. And that's fantastic. I mean, it was kind of interesting just to see what notes my doctor wrote about me in my healthcare record and what was in there and all kinds of interesting, you can see legit your data.
Yeah.
But so that part is fantastic. But the other side of this, and the part that healthcare CISOs are just starting to understand, one of the things that's really we're spending a lot of time in my business on is looking at these APIs that may be coming in and saying, what's the API asking for? Do we know if the API is secure? How do we pen test that API? But I think we're just at the beginning of security professionals being concerned. I don't think we've yet seen instances of abuse, but there are certainly all kinds of doomsday scenarios that people are starting to think about, particularly on this research provision, right? I mean, how do we actually understand who's doing the research, where they come from, who owns that research, what happens to it downstream? And that's all the stuff that's going to get worked out over the coming weeks and months as we all figure out how interoperability rolls out.
All right. Well, something to certainly keep an eye on. Caleb Barlow, thanks for joining us. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible, especially our supporting sponsor, ExtraHop, leaders in cloud-native network detection and response. Learn more at extrahop.com/cyber. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. And for professionals and cybersecurity leaders who want to stay abreast of this rapidly evolving field, sign up for CyberWire Pro. It'll save you time and keep you informed. The nutty taste people like. Listen for us on your Alexa smart speaker, too. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Peltzman, Puru Prakash, Kelsey Bond, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. And now, a word about our sponsor, the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute, providing the technical foundations and knowledge needed to meet our nation's growing demand for highly skilled professionals in the fields of information security, assurance, and privacy. We value their expertise and insights as one of the CyberWire's academic partners, and of course, they're one of the world's greatest research universities. The Institute is also an NSA and DHS designated Center of Academic Excellence in Information Assurance in Cyber Defense and Research. Apply for the Cyber Scholarship Program now. Visit isi.jhu.edu to learn more. And we thank the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute for sponsoring our show.